Hey guys, good morning. It's Miss True Love. I'm just here today to give us another a lesson and hopefully some encouragement to you as well, if I can. Today we're going to look at a topic called elements of a story. And oh wow, the train decided to come through. That's life, y'all. I don't know if you can hear that. Yeah, it always picks the best time to do that. But anyhow, we're going to look at elements of a story today, and it's just an area that, in order to understand a story, you need to look at the elements of the story. And on this little picture over here, you see like a person, looks like a magnifying glass on a book, and that's really what kind of you have to be in order to understand the elements of the story. You got to be like a detective, and I've even said this in class before. When you're a crime scene investigator, like on CSI or Criminal Minds or any of those police drama shows, crime scene investigator shows, they have to look, they're looking for the who did it, where they did it, how they did it, when they did it. And that's what we're looking for when we're looking at the elements of the story. We're trying to break it apart and see what it means and understand how each of the parts works together to make the whole body of a work. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to look at just the basics. First, you have the setting, which is the time and place that a story takes place. We have our characters, which are the people, the animals, and the creatures in a story. Then we have a plot. These are the series of events that make up the story. And then lastly, we have a conflict, which is a struggle or problem between two people or things. So those are just the basics, and we're going to take each of those and look at them in a little bit more detail, and so that we can understand how to best use these to understand a written story. And so let's just go ahead and get started. So let's look at the setting. The setting describes where and when the story takes place. And it helps build a background and creates images in your mind. And it helps set the tone, the mood of the story. Like, when did it take place? Did it take place, is it a current story, or is this something that took place many years ago? Is it someplace local, or is it an island, or where is it? Let's look at just some of the details about setting. Of one, we're going to see that we're going to see the time of day that a story takes place. Now, in a story, the time of day can change from chapter to chapter, even within a chapter. But you're just going to look, but you can break a body of work apart into, by the chapters, because the time of day is going to change for the setting. So just know that it's not just one time of day for the whole book. The time of the year, did it happen in the fall, in the spring, or when did it take place? And like I said, this could change within a body of work. It can, you can have the setting can alter based on, as you read the story. Time in history. Did this happen in, say, like the medieval period? Did this happen in the Civil War era, or did it happen in, like the trying to come up with the 60s, y'all, and it's not wanting to come out. Like, when did it happen? What time period in history did it take place? Vietnam era. That's what I was going for. Um, the scenery. What are we seeing? Are we in the city? Are we in the country? Are we in a populated area? Are we in an area where there's just a few people? How is it? What kind of scenery do we have? And the weather, it also plays a role in the scenery. You know, is it stormy or is it um, sultry and hot? You know, so those play a part as well. The location, just where it happens. Um, is it on a farm? Like I said, that kind of goes kind of with the scenery. The scenery is more of the backdrop, where the location is more like where it happens. So let's look at this here picture. Um, I just found this in a book that was talking about setting, and so I just thought, well, we'll just see um, what we have to think about this here story. And in the story, a teacher asked the students, to describe this, and they're like, oh, it's a house on a hill, or it would look like, oh, is it a castle? You know, um, and some people, were very just used one or two words to describe it. So let's just use our creative imagination, come up with a great setting for this where this story is going to take place. So this is where our mind is just going to have to get into overdrive and think a little bit. So we see it's like a castle by a shore. See, we got the water there, and we can assume it's a castle. It's got turrets and stuff like that. Not only is it just a castle, it's a medieval castle. It happened long, long ago. And then you have to be descriptive about it. We can see, look at that, there's fog coming up off of, it looks like maybe there's maybe some more, if you look in the background of over here in the back, and maybe there's like another little village or something, and the fog is really dense and covering it. So not just fog, but dense fog. The dense fog lifted the castle by the medieval castle. Then we're going to mention something about those rocky hills and how the waves are crashing up against it. Waves crash uh, on the rocks by the hills by the shore. You want to be able to make the reader feel those waves crash up on those rocks on the shore. So after you have your setting, and you don't always have to address setting first, but it's just one of the first ones I chose. Then you need to look at the characters. Every story needs characters, and characters are the people and the animals and the creatures that are in a story. Now, sometimes there might be a story where there's not any human people in it. It could be an animal story. Um, there's a lot of fictional stories where animals are given um, human qualities and the animals talk, or there's beasts, or but so every story needs some sort of character. Well, one thing that you learn about in most stories is that you can have what's called a protagonist and an antagonist. And let's look at them and see how they're alike and how they're different. The protagonist is usually they're the good guy in the story. And usually they have a motivation, they have a desire, they've got a goal or something they're trying to reach. Sometimes they have a flaw. And they have something they need to learn. Well, then we have our bad guys. And they're not always a bad guy. Sometimes it's a person or a place or situation. You know, you think about Superman, and what was Superman? He had many antagonists, but even just that kryptonite was an antagonist thing. It was something that it was his flaw. It was his big thing. So you look at it, so that wasn't necessarily a thing. Or sometimes it's a place, sometimes going back to a place is something that can draw out a flaw in somebody. Usually there's an attitude within the protagonist, and they're always in opposition to the protagonist. So they're kind of the yin and yang. They're the opposites. And I'm going to go out on a limb here to say that sometimes in a story you can see the protagonist can sometime in different stories can be an antagonist too to other people. So this is not anything that's really like cut and dry. Because there's some what is a protagonist, a good guy to one person is the bad guy to another, and it depends on what perspective that you're reading the story. So let's look at some factors in analyzing characters. We're going to look at their physical appearance. What does the character look like? What are their personality? What are their character traits? Maybe what's their background? What's their personal history? What's the motivation for why they act the way that they do? Look at their relationships with others. What kind of conflicts and struggles are they facing? Does the character change within the story? Do they have a metamorphosis? Do they change? Why do they think and feel the way that they do? How do other people feel about the character? So those are just some things to look at when you're looking at a particular character in a story. So we also need to look at character traits or the descriptive adjectives that tell us specific qualities about a character. And I have a list here that I've created, and it's not a complete, total, exhaustive list of characters. There's just some that I just happen to be writing as I was looking at a list of character traits, and I just picked out a handful to share. Like, are they smart? Are they not smart? Are they loyal? Are they rich? Are they poor? Are they strong? Are they weak? Are they fancy? Are they plain? Are they wild? Are they sassy? Um, just there's a lot of different ways that you can use to describe your character, and this is just a list of some of those. Whether you're writing about your character, if you're writing about your character, you want to make them as vivid in your mind as to your reader as you can. So you're going to want to use as many character traits as you could to describe your character so that you can paint a picture of what that character is in your reader's mind. And a good author will do that as well. All right, next we're going to look at the plot. And the plot are the events that take place in a story. And every story needs a plot. And there are different parts to plots. So we see here we got a real fancy drawing here. And it just kind of explains how the plot of a story usually works. And sometimes it doesn't look like this. Sometimes it looks a little bit like one of those monitors you see when you're in the hospital, and it's up and down and up and down and up and down, and it flat lines and goes up and down, because there's not really because sometimes it changes depending on your author. But first you got the exposition, which is the start of the story before the action starts, but they're just giving you that backdrop. You're just laying the fundamentals of the story. And then you see the next thing that happens is the rising action, where there's a series of events and conflicts or in the story that, of course, are going to lead to the climax, which is the turning point, the most intense moment, either mentally or in action in the story. And then we see the falling action, which follows the action which of the climax, and then there's a resolution where you tie together all the pieces and resolve the issues and the conflicts in the story, and it's all tied up in a nice little ball. But as we know that in some stories there is you have the rising action and the climax, and then ultimately a resolution, and the story goes on, and then there's another rising action, and then another climax, and then a resolution, and within one story, and that's what a complex reader or writer would like. I like a book that's got a little bit, just doesn't have one storyline. I like kind of like have multiple things in it. But I like to be entertained, so it's not just cut and dry, just one way. We're going to look at special techniques of plots. Well, first you see there's going to be suspense, which are the excitement or tension in the story. They also use often flashbacks, where they interrupt the normal sequence of events to tell about something that happened in the past. We have a surprise. Sometimes can have a surprise ending where there's an ending you just don't expect. They throw you for a loop. And then they might have what's called foreshadowing, which is a hint about something that's going to happen later on in the story or in the future. All right, now let's look at the last part of our story elements, which is the conflict. Conflict is the battle between two forces. It isn't always bad. Sometimes it just helps to create change. Without conflict, there's usually not going to be a plot. So there's several types of conflict. So we see sometimes that there's character versus character conflict, where they just have a problem with another character. And we see over here we have Tom and Jerry, classic. They have those two have issues with each other forever. Um, Character versus nature. Let's see this guy over here. I mean, you think about movies like Twister. Um, Even sort of like even the movie Titanic would be one. Um, Anything with where they're facing nature. Something like a movie with a character versus nature. Think about that Tom Hanks movie, the one where he's stranded on the island. That one. Um, Also, characters versus society, where the problem with laws or beliefs, a character versus community, society, or culture. What comes to mind with me with that one is like Footloose, where people just didn't want people to dance. That's just wrong, in my opinion. But at the same time, it could be on a different scale. It could be injustice, or I think racism would fall in this category as well. So there's a lot of those. You look at the story like Roots, or many of those different stories that talk about the problems with race in our country would fall into that category. Then the character versus themselves. It's that inner conflict with deciding what to do. That, you got the angel and the devil, like the little girl over there on the shoulder, what they were trying to decide whether or not what's right, what's wrong, that kind of stuff. So that is basically the 4 different types of conflict. And finally, I hope that your story is filled with great things, and that your life is going well right now, and that you're not having conflicts. That your story is being filled with great things that you can share with us when we do get back to the classroom again. Um, but if for some reason you're having some conflict and you need to talk about something related to classwork or any other subject matter, and you need to reach out to me, you have my information here of how to reach me at truelove.catherine@jobcorps.org or reading1gjcc@gmail.com. You can also know that you can leave a comment on the Google Classroom or on the Gadsden Bulldogs Facebook page, and I will answer them as soon as I can. I will also be placing a lesson later on today on IXL.com. Always remember that your username is your name, followed by the number 1 at Job Corps, and your password is Joyful1. So I hope that you can add great things to your story today, that you have some fun adventure in your life, something that brings you joy today. And I hope to talk to you again soon. Bye. Love you guys.